again. We're back with the Money Corner. If you were with us during the past 3 weeks, you got some insight in the process of financial planning. I had as my guests a client of mine, and we protected his anonymity, and two professional planners from Fairview, New Jersey, Don Zoch and Paul Zoch. I've asked Don and Paul to stay with me in the studio tonight to review the process that they went through with George, our anonymous guest, the past 3 weeks. Fellas, I found that fascinating first. What we tried to do for the audience of the Money Corner was to show a simulation of financial planning. I'd like to point out, very briefly, without dominating this conversation, I met you about a month ago down at Glen Point when there was a meeting in the Northern New Jersey chapter of the IAP, who is the Association of Financial Planners, a new national group. And I got the feeling that the financial planners are coming together structurally comparable to the CPA Society, Certified Public Accountants, many other professional associations. This whole profession of financial planning is a new phenomenon on the financial scene. Am I correct in that viewpoint?
Very, very new. It's an infant industry. In fact, probably no more than 10 years old at this point in time.
Yeah. Now, the guest that we had, and you don't know him, I was concerned about protecting, I'm overusing the word, his anonymity. I know him very well, and he's a cynic, in my opinion, in many ways, a cynic from the old school. I wonder if he isn't somewhat characteristic of the kinds of clients you deal with and you get involved
I really
with.
think it is. See, people today, why financial planning is so important is that there's too many alternatives, and it's confusing the issue. We had a Tax Act in '81. We had a Major Tax Act in '82. What does that mean to the individual? It meant a heck of a lot, especially the '82 Act to George. But they have concerns, they have problems, and they don't know the solutions. They work 50, 60, 70 hours a week earning their money. How much time do they really have to sit down and planning tax-wise, conceptually-wise, not product-wise? What are the alternatives? What can we do not only today but over the long run?
Well, I also think it reflects the build-up or the growth of specialization in our society.
Yes.
By way of illustration, I recently started the task of managing money in a fairly large trust, and one of the trustees is a CPA, a very astute accountant. And he said to me, look, I know a lot about the tax laws. I don't know very much about stocks and bonds. That's your job. And I think it's happening to all of us. You know, you've got the internist and the orthopedist and the cardiologist, and never the twain shall meet.
Things are much more complicated today because there's many more choices available, and we are in an area of specialization. However, what a financial planner tries to do is be a generalist in that large arena of specialties and to work in association with someone's stockbroker or his CPA, his attorney, and bring together the loose ends of the plan.
Well, you're like the architect or the interior designer, aren't you really?
What we really know is when we know an individual, we honestly know that individual better than they know their financial situation, business-wise, personally-wise, goals, objectives, taxes, stocks, bonds, estate, and we've got a total picture. And we would work in conjunction, filled with stockbrokers, with CPAs, with attorneys, to mold that plan.
Well, I sat in on the seminar that Don ran down at Glen Point, down at the Lowe's Theater or the Lowe's Hotel in Teaneck, and you made a comment. You said, fellas, and you were talking to your peers now or other financial planners. You said, fellas, you've got to get that client you've got to negotiate with them and negotiate them up to a certain level or down to a certain level. Now, certainly George had certain fixed ideas about his own status, and yet he got kind of puzzled in there as you were talking to him.
Well, I think, again, that was due to the brief situation. However, a lot of people will walk into our office with certain objectives that they feel
might not be realistic,
which they feel they can attain. One of our jobs is to be a realist with these people, run the numbers, take a look at projections ahead, and say, for instance, George, you're way out of line.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
I was fascinated. I hope our audience caught that segment last week or the week before. I was fascinated. George said, oh, I have an income now of about $150,000. My wife and I can live $50,000 to $75,000. And then you said, well, tell me your expectation on inflation. And you said, well, $4,000 a month with a 6% inflation rate. In 4 years, it will cost you $8,000 a month. In 12 years, it'll cost you 16. It's geometric.
That's right.
And it's frightening.
Our job is to take those goals, objectives, state them today, project them out in the future, define the problem. People don't realize, they think they know the problem, define it. What does it take today? Does it take $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, 10? And yes, we may guesstimate but it's a starting point, and that's the process.
But then one of the things that occurred to me as I listened to you talk to George, you can start tossing numbers out which sound like it's almost unreachable, unattainable, and you can kind of frighten people because a person like George may not have the capability of finding comfort.
Exactly. We're not in the business, at least I'm not, of producing fake comfort or reassurances. If George wanted to live on X dollars and maintain his conservative posture and assumed an inflation rate of 6, it doesn't take a genius to run the numbers and say, well, George, if you live to age 67, it's not going to happen. So now what are we going to do? Let's be realistic, you and I. Are we going to get more aggressive in our portfolio, or are we going to be satisfied with a lifestyle of $3,000 a
Don,
month?
that question bothers me. When you toss this question at him of inflation, no one can guess where inflation is going to be. You know, the historic rate of inflation in the United States in the past 40 years was less than 4%.
Correct.
Inflation ran to 18% 2 to 3 years ago. It was absurd. So why do you insist that the customer come to grips with that kind of projection?
Simply
and he's a layman. He really.
Yes.
Why are you so
Well,
forceful
it's important
there?
because people don't understand what inflation does. American people never look forward, they never look to the past, they live in the present. Hey, everything has at least doubled over the last 10 years. Food, entertainment, clothing, everything, housing, at least doubled. We ask people a simple question: do you think we're going to have inflation? Yes. Very rarely does a person say no. And a simple way to approach this: do you want a raise next year? Yes. Exxon gives you a 6% raise. What happens to the price of the goods and services to that product? It gets passed to consumers, people just like you and I, doesn't it, Phil?
Well, are you going on to say then that if the person says 6%, you're going to say to him, "Hey, you better start increasing your income by 6%"? Then is that what you're really trying to do?
Now we're trying to establish is what is their thoughts on it again, because any particular move has to make sense not only on paper and the math, but it has to make sense with them emotionally, or they won't implement.
Don, I assume what you're trying to do is influence their behavior.
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Most times
It's
it
like
would be
you go
battered
to a
around.
doctor, Phil, and you have a problem. They take x-rays, our x-rays, the balance sheet, the tax return. And realistically, at the end of that, they say, you need surgery, you got to go to a specialist. You have cancer, you don't have cancer. That's our job, to realistically identify the problems. In our professional opinion, where is the economy going? We're the specialists here. And potential alternatives that we can investigate.
And the fact of the matter is, Phil, most people need to change their behavior because the statistics are startling. 95% of the people in this country don't make it financially at the end of the line.
Mm-hmm.
You know that as well as anyone. You've been in the industry.
Mm.
You've seen a lot of disastrous cases.
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
I have. Yeah, and it scares me. It really frightens me.
And people don't realize it until they're age 60, 61. They come to you, they say, Phil, retire me, wave your magic wand, I want to do it now. Where were they 20, 30, 40 years ago?
It's too late for realism at that point, because that's the realism that stings and hurts.
Mm. It's also interesting, we're digressing a little, but when you work with the young people in their 20s and 25s and say, hey, you've got IRA, buy these tigers, my God, and they won't see it.
They can't see it.
If anything, they dismiss it and say, oh, what's a dollar going to be worth 20 years down the line? So then they're locking in no dollars 20 years down the line.
That's why the educational process has to be here. Shows like yourself, adult education schools, getting involved in the colleges. It's so important to the consumer today.
Well, fellas, this has been a first for me. It's the first time on the Money Corner I've ever had a topic or guests that have gone beyond 3 segments, and you're in the 4th segment now. I did want to get a kind of wrap-up or overview in terms of this process you're in. I want to thank you for being here, and I hope you'll be back on the Money Corner with me again. Have a good week, everybody, and we'll have a new topic for you. Next week, we're going to have people from the IRS with us. Have a good week.